Welcome, welcome, welcome. I am Takesha. This is Chocolate Milk Cafe again. We're again having a discussion for Black Breastfeeding Week to celebrate Black families who are lactating and chest feeding, body feeding, human milk feeding, infant feeding, whatever the other terminology that I'm missing when I'm pumping, expressing, tandem. We want it all. So we're joining you today to talk about inclusivity and lactation. Today, I am here with Mystique Hargrove of the Black Birth Healer. Please tell me I said that correctly. Okay. And Jovon Key. We will be joined by Kayden Coleman at some point. And we're going to start the conversation. So I am going to introduce kind of what we're talking about today. And then I'm going to let everybody in the meeting, in the session, kind of introduce themselves. So inclusivity and lactation, it can mean a lot of things, you know, inclusivity, diversity, we have all these different terminologies, but for us today as a Black-centered space, we want to talk about all the other ways in which we can support Black families under the diaspora of the umbrella of, you know, lactation and support. So we have, we're going to talk today a little bit about gender. And there's a goal to bring in all the other isms and abilities and all the other aspects. But today, gender is a really hot one and important one that we need to bring into the conversation, and the different ways that dynamics can show up and how people identify. So we decided to bring some people on to have that conversation, share their experiences, and find out better ways to support these families with these identities. So if you all would like, I would love for you to introduce yourselves. I don't know if you want me to point to who can introduce themselves first, or if you want to just take it over. Yeah, so Mystique.
Okay, I'll go. Hi everybody. My name is Mystique, pronoun she/they. I am a pretty much community birth worker of many hats. I do a lot. I'm a PhD student in counselor education and supervision with a research focus on Black LGBTQIA plus individuals in perinatal mental health. I'm a certified full spectrum doula. I am a newborn care specialist. I consider myself a radical lactation specialist. I'm a certified, even though the technical term being very binary, certified breastfeeding specialist, I consider myself certified lactation specialist, certified lactation educator, certified childbirth educator, evidence-based birth instructor. Feel like I'm forgetting something else. I'm a parent to very, very intelligent, very radical, liberated 6-year-old, very dinosaur obsessed. Been doing this work for, been doing this work for the birth work, perinatal work for over 4 years. Been in mental health and wellness field for over 10 years. And yeah, my journey, pretty much, I use the term either breastfeeding or chest feeding my son. I did that exclusively with pumping, because a lot of folks don't want to acknowledge that pumping is lactation, is a part of lactation. So I did chest feeding, I did the pumping, I did supplementation, I did pretty much almost all of it. At just about 7 months, wanted to do it completely for a year, didn't work because how the lactation field is. It's not inclusive, it's not supportive, it's not affirmative. Trigger warning, went into pretty much a deep spiral in postpartum depression, which pretty much dried my supply up. So my experience is what led me here to be, is what folks call me, a perinatal table flipper, because I flip tables. I have to, because I used to shake them and folks didn't get it. So now I'm flipping them so folks can actually pay attention and listen. So I'm happy to be here. So that's me.
That is the only way they listen. If you flip the table, you get their attention. I like that.
Got to.
I'm team table flip. Even, I mean, it's dramatic, but I'm still team table flip. You get your point across.
Just make a table that everyone is sitting at. That way you are definitely heard. There's no question about that.
Right. I flip them and then I'm like, okay, now that we dismantle this, now let's rebuild. So I flip and I rebuild. So I'll make that statement. I'll just flip and leave the destruction. I flip them and teach folks how to rebuild.
I love it because I'm sorry to interrupt or whatever, but like it reminds me of that Tupac thing when he's talking about thug life and like people coming, and he has this whole terminology like when people need food, they're knocking on your door, please sir, let me in, and you're nice and you whatever, and then at the end, like when you're really hungry and starving, at the end of it, you're like, we're gonna knock down your door, we're gonna bust it. And so the table flipping is the last resort. Nobody usually comes to the table ready to flip it.
Right.
So somebody's flipping a table, they haven't been heard. So
right, exactly. I came at peace. I came in peace. Peace did not work. I got ignored. I started shaking it did not. So now I flip it. So I'm seeing that flipping the tables is getting attention. It's like, oh, now we pay attention. Yes, thank you. Now
I am team.
Let's gather the seats. I know I threw some seats over there. Let's pick them up. Let's put it together. Let's rebuild the table because this table is no longer of use. So
your chair is not welcome at this table now.
Exactly. You get it.
But I like the rebuilding the tables. That's what we're about over here. You know what? We're just gonna do our own. We're gonna create our own. We're Black people. We are resourceful. Let's get it popping. So yeah, Jovon, before I get too much talking, because I like this conversation, I'm gonna let you introduce yourself because I talk too much.
Absolutely fine. I'm Jovon Key. I'm a parent. I chest, breast, body fed my now 2-year-old, until just before her second birthday. So, and also pumped. I was what was considered a super producer. So I spent a lot of time with lactation consultants, because I was just confused. I had never heard of body feeding. I had heard of it, but that's all I had, up until I had her. And so, I'd like to consider myself a little bit more well-rounded these days. A little bit of experience under my belt. Lots of challenges that we were able to overcome together. So, oh yeah, my pronouns are he, them. Yeah.
I kind of want to know more about like the support. I mean, we have like I said, Kayden is going to join us at some point. Kayden is a trans man that is doing some work in the chest feeding, body feeding community for trans people, and we love to have his perspective. When he joins us, we will kind of loop him back into like the importance of something. But I do have a question here about how can the lactation community best serve marginalized communities like trans, non-binary, gender non-conforming people who have dysphoria around gendered specific terms and language like breastfeeding. That's a really long question, but I think maybe we can kind of like enter it a little slower with maybe Mystique, if you're up for like kind of explaining gender inclusive language in the lactation community and kind of where we are with that.
Yeah. So when I always, and Jovon knows, when I speak about gender inclusive language, and I'm gonna make this disclaimer because I feel like I'm a broken record, but it's not excluding anybody at all. It's including everyone. And a lot of folks feel that using gender inclusive terms such as chest feeding or body feeding or infant feeding, it takes away those who are, as they identify as themselves as quote binary or cisgendered, meaning they identify being female. They go up in arms about, well, you're taking away me being a mother or my identity as a mother or me saying breastfeeding. And I always tell folks, are you actually listening? Like, we're not listening. Like there's a whole entire community with other sub-communities within that community who are not being acknowledged, amplified, lifted up, supported, or even protected when it comes to, especially in the field of lactation, but when it comes to healthcare in general, nobody's listening to these communities. So when it comes to gender inclusive language, it's literally being, quote, inclusive. It's including everyone. It's acknowledging those who, quote, use breastfeeding. It's acknowledging those who are using chest feeding, body feeding, infant feeding, pumping, SNS, whatever. It's the shared, shared nursing. It's including everybody. So I want folks to understand that using gender inclusive language literally dismantles all the barriers that have been set up, put up, that are pretty much harmful to marginalized communities. And that goes for like majority people of color, particularly Black bodies, because, it's Black Lactation Week. I know it's Black Breastfeeding Week. That is the term. Yes, I get that, y'all. But to be inclusive, I want to uplift. We got to start using this more. I always tell folks, if you, and it's starting to go around, if you remember how to brush your teeth every morning, you can remember how to practice. This is practice. It's not taking anything away. It's not, it's literally like folks are scared of change. And, they always say, oh, you're changing the language, you're changing how we use, but language changes daily. It changes all the time. There's a history of language being chosen. Our folks, Black folks, our ancestors came over here being enslaved. Then we have ancestors who are already on this land, because we're going to acknowledge this was always, and this will always be native land, native indigenous land. And I speak that because my background is Black, indigenous, Latinx. So this is always going to be native land. So not only were our ancestors' bodies were violated and come over here and, taken over and enslaved, our other parts of our ancestors were pretty much dismissed and kidnapped and all this other stuff. It's a painful history of trauma. It's generational trauma. And that their language was taken from them. It was stolen. It was snatched away and colonized. So we are already speaking a colonized language. We already had our own language. So the whole you're trying to change the language in, birth work and lactation, language is forever changing, especially in the Black community. We all also have our own language. Period. It's giving me, we're switching it up every day to this day, present day. We're like, it's giving me this. It's giving me racism. It's giving me colonized culture, so we're always changing.
Shout out to AAVE.
Right. We already have our own language. So it's important that we practice inclusive language. And, it's not going to be overnight. It's, it takes practice. It takes work, because I myself, even though I'm gender fluid, non-binary, I myself in this work had to check, I had to unlearn and relearn a lot of things in this work, because where I come from is super binary, it's racist, it's homophobic, it's transphobic. And I come into a different environment where I had to unlearn and relearn and be, better, especially as an individual, not just a professional, but as an individual. So gender inclusive language, it's a way of, like I stated, including everybody. It's not excluding everybody. If you identify as being a mother, a mom, a mommy, mama, nobody is knocking that. Nobody's trying to take that from you. That's what you use. And as a professional, we have to understand that when we're talking about in general, we should be using inclusive language. We should say parents. We should say body feeding, chest feeding, infant feeding, if those, body feeding and chest feeding are too, weird to you, which I've heard, but I'm gonna roll my eyes at that. But, infant feeding, you're saying it as you're describing something that's for the general communities. But when you're talking to someone, it's best to ask them, what do you know, what are your pronouns? And I don't care if they quote present themselves as, you know, what's considered feminine presenting. Ask anyway, because you have to practice, even if they're on, you know, I've gotten, and Jovon knows, I used to work at WIC, and I was the first and only one who would ask, what are your pronouns? What do you like to be called? And folks were like, what? Huh? And I had to explain that. So as a professional, we have to educate our clients, we have to educate the staff as well. And I will be completely honest, the folks I saw, which I only pretty much folks would refer those from the LGBTQ community that were coming for services, they referred them to see me because I knew, you know, I was part of that community and I knew how to, and I worked with that community all these years. They were like, those who came from the LGBTQ community were like, wait a minute, I have never in my life been asked about my pronouns or what I would be, you know, what I refer to is like chest or breast or, you know, shared body feeding or infant feeding, whatever. I've never heard that. And it was refreshing and a shock. It was a culture shock because they, you know, a lot of us, especially in our area, don't practice that. So when it comes to inclusive language, like being a professional, and personal as well, and outside of being a professional, but personal, individually, collectively, it is needed. It should be a requirement. I'm being totally honest. It should be a requirement because this whole like tiptoeing, walking on eggshells, you know, but at the same time, like I stated before, going a little bit back, if you're talking with that person, use the language they're using. If you use breastfeeding, use that. Nobody's taking that away from you. But in general, when it comes to promoting, when it comes to teaching, writing, talking, using gender inclusive language helps to dismantle all the barriers that have been set up for like marginalized communities. And that's not the only way, but that's like one of like a key things to jumpstart, like as I call knocking it all over, so we can, you know, rebuild and do better.
Kayden is joining us. I wanted to add what you were saying, Missy, because I thought you were going to go there. But the funny thing to me about changing the hi, Kayden, changing the language in people being alert about the English language is, as Black people, we know this. We have gone through many name changes in the history of the United States and culturally. About what we want to be called, and you still will meet Black people who don't want to be referred to as Black. They're like, oh, I don't want to be called a crayon color, or you meet somebody who doesn't want to be called African American, but we have that now in our culture. So it's kind of twisted to think that now when we get into gender, people get so rigid and so binary in the terminology that they want to use and the idea that they don't understand that men can lactate, or that people who are lactating or birthing are not identifying as just women. It's like you just don't want to go there because it's there. You understand it. You understand it just as a people. Like we know what it's like to want to be included. We know what it's like to need representation. So when there's a pushback in our own community, I call foul. Like no, you're not getting it because you don't want to. You just don't want the change, and you want to be transphobic, homophobic, anti-womanist in general, even if it's in the to me, because I'm sorry, like I said, I know I said this will be a conversation between y'all, but I have some passions about this. I'm sorry, but when you get into the conversation about inclusivity, and we think in the sense of, oh no, we're going to just call it breastfeeding, and that's going to give the signal of latching at the breast. You, even if you're so pro women, if you're so pro Black women, you're keeping some of those Black women off the table, the soapbox that I get on it, because there's a lot of Black cisgendered heteronormative women who are single parents who don't have the time to put latch a baby to the breast for full term feeding. So if we're not supporting body feeding, if we're not supporting pumping as a form of lactating, then we're not supporting them either. And that to me becomes the problem as well. Like, so even if you stick to the binary, your lack of inclusivity is leaving behind so many people. So yeah, Kayden, come introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about yourself, and we'll get back into it.
Hi, I'm Kayden. My pronouns are he, him. I'm here with a sprained ankle, which is why I'm laying and late also. But yeah, I'm a trans masculine individual who did give birth from my body. I did, however, not chest feed, but I do advocate for chest feeding. I just really wanted to, what you were just saying, it's so crazy that you said it because my best friend, her and I, it's so crazy, we had the same due date and my daughter came a month early, but they still were born exactly a month apart. And, she was very into breastfeeding. However, she never did use she never actually breastfed at the breast. And she said yesterday, out of the clear blue sky, she was like, I hate that for Black breastfeeding week. I feel like they don't really talk about pumping. She felt very, very excluded, like very, very excluded. And I was like, well, you should say something. She was like, I just don't have the platform. But she really felt very, very excluded. And, it was very reminiscent of like how, I don't understand the need for people to want to leave so many people out of the conversation. It just was, I felt bad for her, honestly.
Come join us over here because we are Chocolate Milk Cafe, and I tell people the chocolate is for our people and the milk is for the human milk, and that's why I love the name because we want to be more inclusive. That's why we're having this conversation, so we can learn how to be more inclusive and integrated into the communities and show up for all our people. But that is heartbreaking because that's exactly it. Like we talk, there's very small circles that are talking about no, lactating in general, human milk feeding is the norm, is what we want to support. We want our people, especially Black people, to give their infants human milk because we know the value in the milk in itself. The latching is good too. Don't get me wrong. Latching at the breast, there are so many benefits to that, but the human milk in itself is really powerful. So we were talking yesterday about tandem feeding, and I was highlighting how if you are an overproducer and you are feeding your baby, but also providing milk to another family, you're tandem feeding because you are providing milk to more than one baby. So yes, we want to really highlight that. And I'm glad we are able to have the conversation today. And Kayden, that you brought that up because I feel bad for your friend, but that is a very good example of how not wanting to be inclusive and being so rigid leaves us, many people at the table that you say you claim to support. So it's the same thing when we talk about Black Lives Matter, right? That terminology is like, we want to be included in the mattering of lives. So that's why we're highlighting, we're screaming from the rooftop, Black Lives Matter. So when we say use inclusive language, we're doing the same thing. Include everybody, folks, all, people, right? Just use terminology that means us as opposed to being so rigid. And we know the binary is not going to stick. So come on, just get on the train, everybody. So Jovon, I don't know if you wanted to say something because,
So the question that you asked was how professionals can be more inclusive to folks like me specifically. So I think being person-centered, right? I think that's kind of what becomes a miss in the medical professionals' lives, that they just, even me, like, I feel like the table flippers are so necessary because I was at a point where I was just quiet, and this is just what I have to accept because it's breastfeeding and this is lactation. When you see them, they want to talk about your breasts, and and so I felt so uncomfortable, right? It was kind of cringeworthy even, it was kind of like being misgendered, right? In that moment, it was just like, but you have to accept this, right? Well, for folks who don't really realize that you don't, right? And so I think that just being person-centered and, like Mystique just said, asking the question, what are your pronouns? What are your pronouns? And if lactation is what you do, right? And they're there to see you something about something in lactating, right? Then the next question is, what terminology do you use? Because everybody doesn't use breasts, right? For me, it was fine. My preference was just to say that nursing, because that was simple for me. I didn't have to have a chest. I didn't have to have breasts. I didn't have to have any of those things because I was nursing my infant, and that was that. And everybody knew what that meant. And there were no further questions asked of me. But I think just being person-centered and individualized care, I think is what is most important. Just not to automatically assume based upon what you visually see in a person, or what you've read on a paper about a person. Asking questions is key. Just go with whatever they tell you. I mean, it's very simple. I mean, you could have a cisgender somebody that's like, hey, actually, I'm not their mother. You know what I mean? Like, and I also, story for a different situation, but I have adopted children. And I always tell people, like, don't automatically assume my wife and I are called mommy, right? What if mommy is a trigger for my adopted children? They came from foster care. What if that's a trigger? Don't automatically walk in here and assume that my children, quote, have two moms, which is not the case. But neither here nor there. The point is that this care should be individualized and person-centered, and it is by that person and what they prefer. Just ask questions.
I'm writing down your some of the things we're taking away, but soapbox again. What is it called? I'm sorry, same-sex families. Yes, thank you, because that assumption that a child has a mother and a father. Black community, hi, how many of y'all been raised by your grandmothers? Like, still, because not the binary, the black man and woman trope, that is so white centered, that is such a white supremacist setup. Our families do not function that way on a regular basis. Like, and I'm not just talking about Black families in America, across the world. We don't function. Not everybody is raised by the person who birthed them. Not everybody is raised by a mother and a father. We all.
It also work in white families. Look at the divorce rate. I'm just saying, it doesn't work. Just generally. Okay, I'm not.
Fair. That is fair. That is true. That the statistics show. You're right. But the idea of it is a white supremacist idealism. Like, yeah, but it's not. That's not how we show up. Not everybody has their fathers in their lives as the primary person. There's some people who are friends are helping raise each other kids. So I like that. I like the lack of wanting to be inclusive. You're just leaving a lot of people on the table. Like, even, we have Mother's Day, Father's Day. Those things don't apply to everybody. Yeah, I'm here for it all. Okay, so I have another question here. We can challenges. Like, anybody have any challenges that members of the community? Kayden, I know you're doing a lot of stuff with trans community around chest feeding and top surgery. Have you come across any challenges that you think that the lactation community needs to be more aware of?
Honestly, it's just a lack of knowledge. Like, yes, people know how chest feeding works in the lactation community, right? But a lot of people aren't taking the steps to educate themselves when it comes to interacting with trans people. And so I think that's the biggest thing, is to realize, kind of, even going back to the question about how professionals can, basically do better. I think what it is that I think a lot of people need to stop coming into these types of professions based off of their own personal beliefs and values, right? So you can't bring your own stuff and throw it at somebody, because at the end of the day, what you're doing is you're causing trauma. And that's the biggest thing, is that people aren't educating themselves because they don't see it as a necessity, because it challenges what their quote unquote beliefs are. But if you take the lactation community out of it, that's like a doctor, a general care physician not wanting to learn about the lungs because he has an aversion to breathing. That doesn't make any sense. If you're going to educate yourself and call yourself a professional, then you should be educating yourself in all aspects, whether or not you agree with them or not, because somebody's life is not for you to agree with. So that's the biggest challenge, in my opinion, is just that lack of care, and care to get educated as well.
For me, I'm gonna jump on that. So for me, in my experience, I think that I agree. One, people are not intentional, right? These professionals are not intentional about, okay, I need to educate myself in these areas, right? They may say it, but then moving forward with that in practice, right? Because in theory, it sounds great. But I think that you also touched on the fact that these professionals are not exploring their own biases, right? So that's a part of the issue. It is the root of their issue, is that they have all these biases inside. They're like, okay, well, we're not even gonna talk about it, right? But I'm inclusive because I like the Blacks. What do you mean? They're great. Some of my best friends are Blacks. The gays are great, right? Like, no, there is far more to these communities than to saying that you have Black friends, than to say that you have 2 Black clients, than to say that I have gay people here, right? And by gay people, you mean me and my wife. Like, no, friend, that's not it. I need you to really take the time and be intentional to educate yourself about what exactly it is this community that you are saying that you serve and that you are working for needs, and being individualized behind that, you know, because if you just ask that person, it's very simple. I mean, even before you take classes, even before you jump into these types of conversations or watch these types of podcasts and things, but before you get there, ask the person. You've met this new person, you have this patient in front of you, and they are sitting there, right? Looking like me, with a child they need to feed with their body, and they need help. You don't know what to say, so don't just assume I say breast. Just say, okay, so what's your name? What are your pronouns? What do you prefer that I refer to your feeding your child? How do you prefer I refer to that? Very simple.
It's about getting to know your client. Like, that's the work I do. Like, when folks come and see me, or before the pandemic happened, when they came and see me, now it's kind of just virtual. But I talk to them like, okay, I'm gonna let you know, this is a disclaimer. I treat my clients like we're kindred. I'm getting to know you. Like, yeah, okay, I get the dual relationship. You don't want to be their friend. Bump all that. When it comes to serving Black bodies, we have to build a rapport that is not so colonized on colonized culture. You have to get to know them. You can't be so general with, assessing of, asking the questions in the chart or on a sheet of paper or from memory. Like, getting to know that person, that's how you connect. That's how you create a safer space for them to feel vulnerable to tell you everything that is happening. Because, Black folks, we have a history of being so scared that if we say something wrong, CPS is going to be involved. We got to, oh, it's a crisis. Yeah, it might be a crisis, but we handle crises differently. Okay. And it's all about, like Jovon said, getting, it has to be person centered. You got to get to know that person. You like it to the point, and I'm not saying like give them 21 questions and ask them like, what's your favorite color? What's your favorite food? But getting to know them, having a conversation, because it's like, I speak on storytelling. We're big when it comes to storytelling. And when you are allowing or creating that space for somebody and you don't force it, I'm gonna be completely honest, don't try to force a safe space on Black bodies, especially Black marginalized bodies, especially those coming from the LGBTQIA plus community. But just setting the intention that you are creating that space to make them feel comfortable and safe to express like what they're going through. Because yeah, it might be low milk supply, but you don't know why they have low milk supply. You don't know because you didn't know that it's because their partner left them, or partners, because let's keep it real. there are poly families, you know what I'm saying? Or you don't know that they're all by themselves, or you don't know that, you know, even, well, I'll speak on, you know, those who come from our community who are teenagers, you know, because that's not being supported enough as far as like Black teens getting, you know, lactation support that's inclusive. So it's all about getting to know that person first. Center your practice to be person-centered.
I think you spoke about SNS a moment ago too. And that's something that we had discussed in my family. And if you're not familiar with that term, that's basically, let me not butcher the term. Help, Mystique.
Supplemental nursing system.
Thank you very much.
Yes, there we go. I couldn't unmute myself.
I know. I wasn't sure if you were frozen, so I was like, let me just say so. Yeah, some people need to learn. It's a system for people who are issues lactating or can't lactate or trying to relactate, all the different ways. If there's trouble, that there's just a tube. Oh, Mystique has one. But your thing is a little slow. Your audio visual, Mystique. I don't know if they saw it if you held it up. But yeah, so it's just a system for. But go on, Jovon, what you were saying about it.
So we also, like Mystique just also mentioned, is polyamory. So we have a different family dynamic than what, again, cisgender folks have these ideals that, you know, things are supposed to look a certain way. My wife and I and my girlfriend, we all discussed the SNS systems for my baby, right? Because I birthed the baby. I wanted everybody to be involved, right? This is not just my responsibility. Wait a minute, everybody. And so that is part of it, is that I think that not wanting to have that open dialogue with the professionals who could be closed-minded when I walked in that door, right? And I already have other hats that I'm clearly already visually wearing, right? And so having someone of color that I walked in to talk to was fantastic as a start, right? Because now I already don't have to change the way that I'm speaking, right? When I walk in with this AAVE, I'm not going to be viewed as ignorant, right? Then I have the LGBT piece on me, right? And so it's like, okay, all right. So if this person, okay, they're affirming, okay, all right. So then their language, right, behind that. So it's like all these it's so multifaceted, right? You can't just have this just one area and say, okay, well, I'm inclusive. It's so multifaceted. Again, the whole individualized piece, man, it's got to be there.
I'm with you on that. If anybody has anything else, but I've been writing down little tips that you.
And I was also gonna say that professionals need to get comfortable being uncomfortable having those conversations. That is why, folks, it's easy to say, oh, I'm inclusive. And, you know, you post, you know, cute pics of graphics of, you know, queer and trans families or queer and trans individuals, you know, body feeding, whatever. But you have to have those conversations, though. Like, you can't keep sweeping things under the rug and say, I'll deal with it later. That's where growth happens. Like, growth is going to be uncomfortable. Get over it. Not trying to be funny. It is what it is. This is me flipping the table. Get over it. We can't be so timid and can't say, oh, well, let's discuss this later because, you know, I don't want to offend folks. You're going to have to offend folks. I don't care. I don't care if I offend you. I do not care, because you're going to learn either way. I'm gonna plant the seed in your mind. You may at that time disagree with what I have to say and what I'm speaking on, but in the end, something's gonna trigger for you to say, okay, there has to be a change. It happens for some, it doesn't happen for everybody, but you have to get comfortable being uncomfortable and having those conversations. And the more you do it, the more change will happen in this work. I had to say that. Because folks
I'm with you.
It's a call out. You got to start calling folks out. Like, I'm like,
yeah,
it has to be a call out. Like, especially in our community, in our Black community, like, we are so used to sweeping things under the rug and keeping quiet and tiptoeing and like, get out of that. I call it slavery mentality. We have to, like, this is how we build our village. Like, back in the day, it wasn't no, you know, as a village before we were enslaved, our folks were enslaved, it wasn't no tiptoeing. It was like, you wrong. Let's fix it.
And that's the thing, like as a black community, we have to be comfortable with calling each other out, and not necessarily out where we're canceling each other, but in the sense of telling everybody when they're wrong. Our elders, our peers, we have to get into that, because the Black maternal, gestational, reproductive health field, we're dying. We don't have time, right? We don't have time to like wait it out or like find a perfect moment. No, we need to get in there and start doing the work. And we are used to being uncomfortable, but we have a level like where we are. And when you all were talking about biases, I'm like, we spend so much time telling white people to check their biases that we have to actually acknowledge that we have them too, especially Black people in the medical field. This whole, all these, all right, we're at the point now where it's like, oh, Black women or Black birthing people are dying. Go get a Black professional to support you, but they're being educated by the white system and perpetuating some of the same things. So we need to be acknowledging of that, and they need to be called out on their biases as well, because we all have them. Mystique explained their biases as someone in the community. I know I have them. I'm constantly uncomfortable in my position with Chocolate Milk Cafe, trying to figure out how we can partner and be in community with other people. And I'm like, I don't know how this is going to go. I'm Kayden, I'm like, I don't know how the conversation is going to go in talking, because, you know, you just don't know. You don't know what other people's experiences are, but we have to have them, because this is how we get here, right? This is how we can move the conversation forward. This is how we can, you know, start broaching more of these conversations and getting more people into the fold.
But it's comfortable for you as a professional. You can only imagine how it is for the client. How how much anxiety exists at just the buildup at heading into that appointment, right? The weeks and the days leading up to that appointment, how uncomfortable that has to be.
Yeah, I agree with that 1,000%, because it's like, for me, when I was going through my pregnancy, I had high blood pressure every time I walked in the door. And they're like, you know, how do we get this down? We ain't, because I got to come in here and have these conversations with y'all. And I have to walk in here on guard, because I know one of you guys are going to disrespect me. Or I know I'm going to have to be in here educating you. Right. And I'm definitely with the whole like individualizing the experience. But beyond that, when I say education, I mean literal like education. I'm not talking about like pronouns and things of that nature. I'm talking about, you know, surgeries and hormones and things of that nature. Like, educate yourself. You need to be educated, because there's too many people out here telling people the wrong stuff and passing it off as though they know. I can't tell you how many trans guys have come to me upset because their lactation person told them that after surgery, because of how much breast tissue was left in there, they could probably lactate, which is false. They're just saying that. You know what I mean? It's literally just, and it's not just lactation people, providers, OBGY, like all of them, literally surgeons, people who claim to be transgender surgeons are literally out here giving out misinformation. And it's all about that education. And honestly, it's not an education that you can get at a university or a nursing school, because they're not teaching the right things. All of this stuff is, a lot of what people know is like a shot in the dark. Like, this makes sense to me, so I'm going to pass it off as true. And it's not actually true. So yeah, that's what I meant by like education, like literally doing the work. And it's not just, I'm an ally, or I'm a part of the community. You can be a part of the community and still not know a damn thing. There's plenty of them. They exist. You know what I mean? So it's that education piece. I feel like a lot of things in the world can be solved by people just simply educating themselves. Ignorance is what fuels hate. If you ask me, y'all call them biases. I call them microaggressions. But you know, there's plenty of them. I use the words interchangeably. No,
I was trying to fight the people.
I call them that because they feel very aggressive to me. They always do. Oh,
we lost me.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, you are onto something. Not to go too much off topic or anything, but I had an experience where I had a fibroids and had what was called a myomectomy to get them removed. And the doctor that I had was Black, but her thing was, oh, you have this surgery, you have to only have C-sections afterwards. I didn't learn until after that experience when I got pregnant with my next set of kids that that is not necessarily true. But that's a additional education. That's something that people need to do in the field, right? So in the lactation field, there's a lot of on-the-job learning that people do with the people you have. So you need to ask the questions to everybody. Oh, what was your experience like? Oh, how did that work? Like if we're not doing follow-up care, that's why postpartum care is so important, because you need to learn, okay, I gave this advice or this, they follow this routine. Now let me follow up with them and learn what that was about. People don't do that, like especially in the hospital setting. It's a quick, okay, I see you, or you're discharged, the end, right? They don't see that family again. They might call them up and ask about, oh, how are you doing? How was your experience in the hospital? But they're not really interested in what's going on with them. And again, I hate to go back to like maternal health or whatever, that's up until a first year. So anybody I see who's had a baby, I'm concerned about their health for the first year of life, because our maternal mortality rates are determinant on that. So your gestation is not just, oh, you had the baby, you made it out of the hospital, you're safe. No, there's trauma that you could have had from that experience. You're still lactating, which when we talk about birth stories and birth, that's like to me the wedding, right? Yay, let's focus on that one day thing. And then, but what about the marriage? What about the actual relationship? What about that relationship with you and your child? And how is that going? We need to do more care in that area. And that's where we'll get more information from people. So like Kayden saying with the education, you'll get to understand, okay, this didn't work that well for that family. This may be the reason why they ended up down a spiral in case of not actually feeding their babies anymore, or they ended up with this issue. There's some mental illness issues here, or they just need support, because if it's one person with multiple kids, how are they actually getting, caring for each individual kid in their family? So yeah, there's a lot of stuff that we're leaving off the table when we have these conversations.
And age, as I think Mystique mentioned that earlier. My daughter-in-law, my grandson's almost 2. He'll be 2 in November, and she's young. My son is young, and as I told you, I knew nothing about breast, chest feed. I had heard of it, but that was it. I had no experience and had not looked up a thing when I had my child, and I was much older than she was. And now she kind of she didn't have the support that she needed, right? She didn't know the questions to ask, even though I was there, right? She was like, I don't know what else to do. He seemed so frustrated with, I can't get, and I can't. And so what happened? She put it down. She was like, I don't know what to do, and I don't know who to call. And sometimes it's late at night, and my doctor's office is not open. And, when I try to go there, nobody speaks Spanish, so I have to wait. It's all these things that need to be there to support families all the way through, to see it all the way through. You got to see it through. Ain't that what they say on TikTok? You got to see it through, my boy. You got to see it through. And that's what happens. It gets put down too often.
Yeah, that's real for like the young pregnancies, because you have a lot of people in your ear at that age. And it's hard for an adult to manage like the naysayers and all the lack of support. So even for a teen parent, I could say that. I'm looking at the time. I would like to know if you all want to bring anything else up before I do our closing out question. I am enjoying this conversation. Like I said, we should do a part 2. I'm loving these conversations because I like having the inclusivity conversation when we're talking beyond just like, see me, like where it's just, okay, let's get past that. In all these conversations, I'm over the 101s. Like, okay, let's get into like more of what that looks like and how that's going. And I appreciate having you all here to be able to like fine tune that and, speak from your experiences and understanding of that. So is there anything else you want to like show? Maybe you can tell people where they can find you if you want, and then we'll ask the final like closing question.
I can be found on Instagram at Kayden X Official. Also, I am on the September 25th, I am doing the last of the year, transmasculine chest and body feeding. It's a really long title because I'm trying to be inclusive, but basically a workshop that is centered around transmasculine people and feeding their babies with their bodies. There we go.
Okay, sorry, y'all. My internet is acting very janky. But you guys can follow me on Instagram at Black Birth Healer, Facebook, The Black Birth Healer. Also my website, www.theblackbirthhealer.com.
And I'm just a parent, so I'm out here on regular old Facebook, regular old Facebook, Shiloh Key. You'll find me.
Jovon in the streets in the comments section somewhere.
Right.
Well, I mean, I also want to say that we are hoping that as we're growing with Chocolate Milk Cafe, we do hope to have some inclusive groups. We do chapters based on location, but we're hoping to expand that. So maybe you'll see one day we'll have maybe someone like Kayden or someone like leading our LGBTQIA space so we can get more inclusivity. We do want to promote that. If you are interested in that type of support, send us some messages and we can definitely partner, connect you in the ways that you need it. We're trying to gather more people who are doing this type of support because Black lactation needs a lot more. I've been told by someone that for people who are in the queer community, it hurts more when they come into Black spaces and they're not getting supported. It's like a double harm, So I want to make sure that we have more spaces for that. So with that being said, this is like Mystique said, Black Lactation Week, known as Black Breastfeeding Week, but Black inclusive. It's the Blacktivist week here. And with that, the theme for this week is supposed to be the big pause, collective rest for collective power. And I kind of want to close out with learning a little bit about how you all prioritize rest. If you saw the conversation yesterday, I'm struggling, but I'm interested to hear if you have any tips or things that are working for you for rest. I know Kayden is going to be resting. Now that you have a little bit of injury, not to laugh at your injury, but like your body's like, you know what, now we sitting down. But for everybody else, please let us know what's going on in form of rest for you. How are you pausing and taking it in?
Well, I'll say for me, because I've been literally on the go this whole month and I'm feeling it. It literally feels like homecoming to me, like it's the good, the bad, the ugly. So with tomorrow pretty much being like my last day, technically, even though this week ends on the 31st, tomorrow ends for me. On the 31st, I'm resting. As they say, Mystique, on the 7th day, Mystique rests. That's how I'm doing it. Because it's been empowering, it's been annoying, but more so like liberating. So I'm literally going to try to do, my partner's going to help with that, absolutely nothing on the 7th day. Like I'm gonna be lazy because like I know this theme is about restorative rest and resting and all that. But those who've been in this work and been doing a lot of things this week, we haven't been resting. We've been giving our folks, like the community, like ways to rest. So on the 7th day, Mystique is resting. I'm doing absolutely nothing. I'm Netflixing, Hulu, Amazon Prime, pigging out, because I love food, and just being loved up on my kindred, loving up on them, making sure they're good. And just like, TikToking it too, because it's slightly addictive, but it's a part of my rest. It's a part I can escape, is what I call this ghetto world. Just be in TikTok and laugh and just, celebrate just Black bodies and, Black lives, all Black lives that are needing to be celebrated. So yeah, I'm not doing nothing on the 7th day. Yes.
For me, I have been very intentional about resting because my body, I haven't rested. I had a baby a year ago and I never stopped. I never stopped to rest. And, you know, my body is feeling it. My test results are feeling it. So I have been doing this thing where if I don't have to, I won't. And that includes getting out of bed for any reason other than to eat or use the restroom. Um, that happened yesterday and the day before that, and obviously will be happening today. I did want to go to Battle of the Bands, but my ankle has said no. So I will be watching Netflix. Also, Netflix suggestion, clickbait. That was my binge for yesterday. When I say it was so good, I know this is completely off topic, but when I say it was so good, it like, make sure you have a lot of time because you don't want to stop watching it. It's really good. But yes, rest. Okay, sorry.
Thank you, because I'm gonna be looking at, because I need some suggestions of not doing absolutely nothing on the 7th day. Thank you, Kayden. Thank you.
So for me, I try to minimize draining and energy reducing activities and people. I need to add that little last piece again and say people, because I think that sometimes we can all like give too much to others. And so I try to reduce and minimize those things and people that are energy reducing, energy draining for me. Having structure. There are 3 things. Having structure is the second one. In my house, my kids go to bed at 7:30. Say what you want. My kids are 13 and 14. My older 2 that are still living at home. And I'd be like, good night. It's 7:30. Good night, friends. See y'all in the morning. And lastly, I love TikTok. I don't know why, who brought this thing into my life. I love TikTok. But I I post quite a bit on TikTok. And it is definitely a release for me. And it's just freeing, you know, a second away from my reality. So those are my 3.
TikTok is really, really complicated, or I'm just out of touch. I never thought I would be the one, but I posted a TikTok the other day and it just took so much out of me, like the editing and I was like, oh no, I'm good. I like watching them though.
Hey, Kayden, just text me, I got you.
I am not on the TikTok ban. I watch the ones that end up on Facebook and Instagram. That's when I see, or if my niece sends a link. Like one more thing, when my kids get a little older, maybe they'll get into TikTok if it's still around. But yeah, I love this. I'm out of words. Like, thank you all. I enjoyed this conversation. I love what you all are doing. I'm trying to drink more water. That's my go-to. I'm gonna write down clickbait. I've took some notes. I have person-centered, individualized care, ask their pronouns, don't assume, listen, affirm them. I wrote that down based on what you were all saying. Talk to them, not at them is another one I wrote down. Alkaline water, that's a good one. My husband likes alkaline water. I should drink one of his. That's a good idea. But talk to them, not at them. So when you were talking, I'm like, you know how people, when education, they like to talk to you. I mean, like about things, not talk at you, like you're not an actual person. And then you talked about lack of knowledge, knowing your bias / microaggressions, be intentional in educating yourself, don't force it, and get comfortable about, why did I leave out the word? Get comfortable being uncomfortable. So those are some of the takeaways from the conversation you all were having today. I'm taking notes because I'm, like we were saying, all about all Black lives. I want to see my people thrive. I want to see the babies getting the things that they need. Now, this is not a space where we're shaming people who have given formula instead. That's understandable if that's the decision you need to make. We have people who do that. But if we can get you human milk and we can support you on that journey, and that's the journey you want to be on, we want to be here for you, and we want that for the babies as well. And because we know it saves lives. So I thank you all for joining us today. I do not want it to end, but I know y'all gotta go and do other things, and everyone's so busy. But again, thank you. And I'm going to stop this recording, and then I'm going to stop the live. So bye.